Have you noticed that animated movies look so much better than the actual shows they are based on? Why does it look better? What I'm about to show you I learned by working with the pros in the industry, breaking down the process that animation studios use, and my personal experience in the last 7 years. Let's create movie quality post-production for your own animations.
We bring you tonight's exciting story.
What is the goal of post-production? It's where all your hard work that went into creating your animation can finally be polished. What's most important for this is post-production will always serve the story, and every decision you make should be guided by what do I want my audience to feel. This is the scene that we are about to work the post-production on, and as you can see, Seraphim is going to space. Now this is for a music video I'm making, and let's just say that this might be Sarah's last minutes on this spaceship. We'll be using After Effects as it is an industry standard. When you open After Effects, this is what you're going to see. You can just close this window and we'll work here. Now if by any chance I have panels that you do not have, all the panels are under window and here they all are. Now before we start importing our scene, go to Edit, Preferences, Import Settings. In here you want to set at what frames per second the program should import every single image sequence. I have it at 24 since it's an industry standard, and that's what I would recommend you to do too. Once you have set this, you can click OK, and now right click and click on Import. Let's go with multiple files. I will go to my renders folder, and here I have divided every scene into backgrounds. I'll select everything in here and click Import. And they have been added to my project window. Then I go back to renders, sequences, my scene, and here we have each one of the passes. Now for what passes to export, the more separation you have, the more control you will have. This was all done in Clip Studio Paint, but you can use whichever software you prefer. I have my background layer. I also separated the chair's arm just so it can be on top of the character. And I have an animation folder for each of the passes that I need. My line art pass, then I have my color pass, and finally I have her hair. I only painted the pink color because we will do the gradient inside of After Effects. I also painted a shadows pass, and one detail I want you to see is the shadows that are on top of her skin I painted with a different color. You don't really need to do this, but I like doing it as it adds a little more warmth. I see some artists who paint the shadows one frame after the other, but what I recommend is you actually animate the shadow guidelines while you're cleaning up your keyframes. That way they will stay more consistent. Now to export, I need to remember to turn off whatever background we have until it's completely transparent and leave only the layers for the pass that I'm exporting. For example, the line art. You want to export your character animation as a PNG sequence with transparency. PNG files are great as they not only have transparency, but also a great balance between quality and size. So let's say I want to import the line art.
I don't have to do that.
I can click on any of this, and we have our sequence options, and it's forcing it to import from the first image to the last number that has that same name. Just click Import, and it just imported the entire image sequence of that pass. So we will do that for each one of this. I click on Done. If it's a short animation and you want to loop it, you can always right click, go to Interpret Footage, Main. Over here you can select how many times you want it to loop, and it will do it automatically. Instead of dragging one of these into our timeline, what I will do is create a new composition. Here you can type a standard resolution like 1920 by 180 pixels, and the frame rate we want to change to 24. The duration of the scene we know it's 5 seconds. Click OK. Okay, now we can start importing. Let's do first our background just by dragging it onto the timeline, and then our character. The way the timeline works is you have each one of your passes is a different row, and moving to the right you're controlling your time. If I move just after the first second, you'll see that the background has disappeared. That's because our background layers only last, you can see here, for 1 second. I can select them and stretch them with my mouse. Now they last for the entire sequence. But if I zoom out, everything is getting cropped. This is because this is my final output, but we want a way to be able to work on all of this without it being limited by the frame. What we will do is select everything inside of the scene, and in your keyboard click Ctrl-Shift-C and create a pre-comp. A pre-composition is another timeline inside of your timeline. So this one I will call Sarah Spaceship Full. Leave this on, click OK. Now everything is inside of this composition, Sarah Spaceship Full, and if I double click, I go inside. You can also go back and forth between the two as they become tabs also. And in this pre-composition, I can go into composition and composition settings. And here is where you can modify your composition's size and even correct its duration. Now we can work on here freely. And if I go and composition settings, and here is where you can modify your composition's size and even correct its duration. Now we can work on here freely. And if I go back to this one, this is our export. I can make it smaller and change the framing, but we'll worry about this in a bit. For now, let's just focus in here. So another important thing is whatever is above in the timeline is also on top. So of course, what I want to be on top of everything is the line art. Let's move closer to see what I'm doing. And if the preview looks too low quality, you can always change the resolution here to full resolution. The higher the resolution, the more time it will take to show you this preview. So let's go back to a third. So we have the line art, then we would have the shadow, and then both the hair color and the character color. But before we get started with the actual post-production, we need to talk about color theory for post. It's easy to get lost looking at examples like this. The first thing we need to do is we need to think like a camera, especially when it comes to values. We've talked about this in other videos. Values are the scale from total darkness to complete white. You see, cameras have a limited range of values that they can show. Everything below the darkness limit gets crushed into pure black, and everything above the brightness limit into pure white. So we have to make the most of the entire range. Pushing your values is the most important aspect to make your shots look more cinematic. It's the reason why a show like this can look like this. And the way we imitate this in animation is by using effects. For this we have to talk about the effects and presets panel. The first thing we're gonna do is make sure our background has enough range of values. So for that I will go to my search bar and look for a levels effect. Grab it and throw it on top of the background. And the effect will open right here. This one I do have to make this a little larger to see it fully. In here I can play with the value range. So I can move the middle ground and then bring back the highlights. With this button I can preview the effect on and off, and you can see how I'm forcing the lighting to be stronger. Now I will present you an alternative. I will actually delete this and we will go to Layer, New, and add an adjustment layer. This is one of the most powerful tools in After Effects. It only carries the information of the effects that we want to apply. So now let's do the same thing, grab the levels, throw it on the adjustment layer, do something similar, and right now if I turn it on and off by clicking on the I button, you can see it's also affecting the character, and we do not want that, so I will just move it below as it only affects whatever is below it. This way I can apply the same effect to everything that's underneath it instead of going layer by layer. But another great advantage is I can press T on my keyboard to bring up the opacity menu and lower its opacity. And with that I am playing with the intensity of the effect. Levels are not the only way we can modify our values, but as we move forward we'll see other ways. Let's rename this. Moving on to my character, it really doesn't feel like he is in there. Even if I turn on my shadows pass and use a blending mode by clicking under mode and switching it to multiply, if you cannot see these options you have to click right here. Click to go back. His local colors don't feel right for the scene that he is in. This is why we need to talk about integration. We've also talked about this in other videos. In the real world, light is always bouncing around, contaminating everything else with its colors. We want to do the same to our local colors. For this, I will grab the local color layer, duplicate it by clicking Ctrl D, and now for this one on top, I will go to my effects presets and look for hue and saturation, and throw it on top. In here I can play with the hue of these colors, its saturation, and even its brightness. But there's an extra button that says colorize. Now everything has been tinted by the same hue. I will search for a hue that's closer to the scene that we're in. Perfect. We can increase the saturation a bit. And now by using a color blending mode, we will apply it on top. And you can see this doesn't work right now. I will press T for my opacity and throw it to 0. But check this out, as I start bringing it up, there is a point, let's say around 20%, where suddenly the colors feel like they are actually contaminated by the light that's bouncing in the scene. This integration pass is what allows us to use whatever color palette we want, while still just worrying about painting the local colors of my character. This way you can use the color of light to tell a story. But how do we know what colors to use? The key to this, as in everything in art, is to use references. But to know which references to search for, I recommend you create a color script, which is an exploration of what story your lighting and color will tell in each scene. Then, based on that color script, you can create your mood boards for each of the specific sequences. You'll notice when you start gathering enough references for one sequence, there will be a common denominator. That is the mood that you're going for, and you can see how I applied it to each one of my scenes. Let's apply all of this to our scene. I will click on the character hair color and go to Layer, New, Solid. A solid is just a shape of a single color. Right now it will fill the entire screen, and I will fill it with her normal hair color. Click OK. Now it's on top of everything. And what we will do is, while selecting the solid that we created, go to the rectangle tool and click it to create a mask. I will drag it across the screen, right at the point where her hair gradient will start, and see the solid is only lasting for a single second, so I have to stretch it to the end of the composition. And by clicking on this arrow, click again to open the mask options, and you can go to the feather option, which is how soft its edge is, and make it bigger, so it gives us that gradient for her hair. In After Effects, clipping works a little different. I have to duplicate my hair layer by clicking Ctrl D, and now I have to place it on top of the blue solid, and in the solid go to this option and select a matte to be the hair color, and now it's working. Okay, let's create an integration pass, but this time I will select all the layers that have the character's main color and click on Ctrl-Shift-C to create a pre-comp. Now we have all her color excluding the line art. Let's close this. I will duplicate this comp using Ctrl-D and repeat the process that we just learned. In this scene the integration is very subtle, but you can see cases like this hallway scene where the integration actually carries a lot of weight. I will turn our shadow layer to a multiply blending mode, and now that we know how to lower the opacity, we will press T. This one I think around 60% is fine. Okay, so far so good. Now we can start working with gradients. That's another reason why we made this pre-comp with the entire contents of her color, because this also works as selection. If I duplicate it and place it here on top of the line art, turn off its opacity because we don't need it, it's only going to be a mask. We can make a new solid. Let's use a color like this one, maybe saturate it a little more and make it more greenish. Click OK, extend it to the end, and now we have this. Again, we're going to make a mask. By selecting the mask you can move it around, or if you click over here you can actually move the points. So let's do something like this and give it around 1,000 pixels of feather. Set it to multiply, and the final touch, place the Serra color precomposition on top, and again on the solid we will select this to be a matte. There we go. See, now there's a gradient on top of the entire character. Now this is quite dark, so we will lower its opacity to 50%. You see how there's some shadow on the seat? You can repeat this as many times as you like, using solids to create gradients and then masking it to your character. This one I will just use the pen tool to do something like this. Move this on top. Let's just set it to multiply. We can make it so it's not there at the start, and only after this drawing we start having this. To change the colors of the solid, all I have to do is go to Layer, Solid Settings. Let's make it more saturated, but lower its opacity. I actually like it quite a bit. So just like we have a gradient from below, we we could have another one from behind. So I will duplicate the one we already have and press R to get my rotation options. Rotate it by changing the value and
Mm-hmm.